At the beginning of the film, we find this boy. We'll come to know him as Piggy, dazed and aching in the wreckage of a crash landing. He fumbles for his glasses, puts them on, and starts limping through the trees trying to make sense of where he is. Hunger hits fast. He spots something on the ground, picks it up, gives it a lick, and immediately regrets it when he flips it over and finds it crawling with worms. He tosses it aside. Moments later, a wild pig bolts past him and scares him half to death. Eventually, he stumbles onto the crash site itself, but he can't bring himself to get close. There's a decomposing body near the fuselage, and that's enough to send him looking for food elsewhere instead. He climbs toward a fruit tree and starts eating, trying to calm his nerves, when he hears rustling nearby. He bolts, until he realizes it isn't a threat. It's another boy, Ralph. This is where the friendship that anchors the entire film begins. The two decide there's safety in numbers and start exploring together, stopping occasionally so Piggy can use his inhaler. His asthma is a problem that's going to follow him through this entire ordeal. They find a freshwater stream, and Ralph, without hesitation, strips down and dives in. He's been swimming since he was 5. His father, a Navy officer, taught him. He invites Piggy in too, but Piggy admits he can't swim. His asthma's always kept him out of the water. There's also something heavier underneath that confession. His parents are gone. He only wades in far enough to get his feet wet, and the two of them end up splashing each other and laughing despite everything. It's by this stream that Piggy finds the object that's going to define the next several days of survival, a massive conch shell. He cracks off the tip, something he remembers his aunt doing with one of her own, and hands it to Ralph. When they reach the beach, Ralph blows into it, and the sound carries. One by one, more survivors start emerging from the trees, drawn by the noise. A whole group of kids, alive, scattered, and just as lost as they are. While the group shares fruit and tries to process the fact that no adults have turned up anywhere, a second group arrives. A choir, marching in formation, led by a sharp-eyed boy named Jack. The moment Piggy invites them over, one of the choir boys, Simon, suddenly drops to the ground, fainting in the heat. Piggy points out that their thick uniforms are a terrible idea in this climate, but Jack brushes it off. Apparently Simon faints all the time. When the other choir boys try to help him, Jack tells them to just leave him where he fell. Then Jack turns his attention to Piggy and dismisses him outright, mocking his weight and telling him to stop talking so much. It's the first crack we see in what will become a much deeper fracture. Ralph steps in and suggests they need a leader. Jack assumes it should obviously be him. He's the head of the choir, after all, but Ralph pushes for something fairer, nominations, then a vote. Once Simon comes to, the group votes, and despite Jack's confidence, the choir boys are outnumbered. Ralph wins by a landslide. Jack is furious, but Ralph offers him a consolation prize, control over the choir as his own group. Jack's mood lifts the instant his choir rebrands themselves as hunters. With everyone uneasy about being trapped with no clue where they are, for boys, Ralph, Jack, Piggy, and Simon set out to climb the island's mountain and get a look at their surroundings. Piggy struggles to keep pace, his asthma slowing him down with every step, and Ralph's patience starts running thin. The two argue, and Piggy doesn't hold back, reminding Ralph flatly that without him, there wouldn't even be a conch, and there wouldn't be a chief. It's on this climb that they make their first horrifying discovery. The body of the pilot, still strapped into his seat. Ralph wants to give him a proper burial. Jack disagrees. In his eyes, the man made a fatal mistake and has to answer for it. Ralph compromises, suggesting a sea burial instead of a religious one, and Jack actually likes that idea. Piggy is the lone voice against the whole plan, but he's outvoted. The problem is the body's still attached to the seat, and it's too heavy to carry. So the three boys, ignoring Piggy's objections completely, simply shove it down the slope. It crashes brutally to the bottom, and Simon, shaken, mutters a quiet prayer over what just happened. When they return to camp, the news is grim. They're stranded on an island, completely encircled by ocean, with no sign of rescue and likely no surviving adults from the crash. Panic spreads through the group instantly. Jack tries to peel off with his hunters right then and there, but Ralph holds the group together. It's at this point that Piggy steps up with an idea meant to keep order. Only the person holding the conch shell is allowed to speak. He lays out priorities: shelter first, then food, then sanitation. The hunters laugh at him, but the rest of the kids actually agree. Then a small boy with a birthmark on his face raises something that chills the group. He claims he saw a beast in the woods, and he's certain it'll come back after dark. Ralph tries to reassure everyone there's nothing out there. Jack, sensing an opportunity to look heroic, promises that if any beast does show up, his hunters will kill it. Chores get divided up, and Piggy heads into the woods to gather firewood. While he's out there, a piglet darts past him, and he gives chase, eventually cornering it against a tree. Jack appears with a knife, but freezes. He can't bring himself to strike. Piggy urges him to just do it, But the hesitation costs them the moment, and the piglet escapes. Furious and embarrassed, Jack turns the blame on Piggy, insisting he was simply choosing his angle. When Piggy calls out the lie, Jack threatens him with something far worse than an insult, warning him that Ralph will eventually toss him aside too. Piggy agrees to keep what happened quiet, and Jack throws one more jab his way, bringing up the beast just to unsettle him further before walking off. Back at camp, Piggy keeps gathering wood, this time with help from a set of twins and Simon, who's drawn in by Piggy humming a tune and asks to learn it. The mood lightens, they sing together, and Piggy even loosens up enough to dance a little. Later, Ralph approaches him privately, wanting to know his actual name if he's going to lead this group properly. Piggy tells him, Nicholas. His family calls him Nicky. With enough firewood collected, the group realizes they have no way to actually start a fire. No matches, nothing. Piggy warns them the wood they've gathered is rotten and won't burn right, but nobody's interested in his opinion. Someone remembers Piggy's glasses can act like a magnifying lens, and despite his protests, and Ralph initially trying to intervene on his behalf, they snatch the glasses right off his face and use them to spark a flame. The fire catches, and for a moment, everyone celebrates. Then it spreads. Fast. Piggy reminds them, with no satisfaction at all, that he warned them about the rotten wood. Jack insists it's nothing they can't handle, but the flames have other plans. Racing toward the trees, sending burning branches crashing off the cliffside as the whole group scrambles to get clear. Piggy suggests cutting a firebreak, but there's not a single tool among them. As they flee, his asthma drags him behind the others. He pushes himself too hard, trips, and slams his head against a tree, blacking out for several terrifying seconds before staggering back up and making it out of the forest alive. On the beach, the group watches the island burn. Some of the younger kids have drifted off and won't wake up, no matter how loud the others shout. So Piggy grabs the conch and starts blowing into it with everything he has. It takes several attempts, but the sound finally jolts the sleeping kids awake. In the chaos, Ralph notices something. The fire isn't crossing onto the rocky side of the island. It's being stopped naturally. Small relief. But then Piggy does a head count and realizes the boy with the birthmark, the one who warned them about the beast, is nowhere to be found. He's simply gone. Time passes, and we get a glimpse into Jack's headspace through a flashback. Before any of this happened, he was on that doomed flight, watching the warning signs stack up. Turbulence, falling luggage, a flight attendant who looked visibly sick, and telling himself it was nothing. When the plane finally lost control and the cabin erupted into screaming, Jack was the one face that stayed eerily calm. Back in the present, Jack and another boy, Maurice, are deep in the forest tracking pig prints. They get close, but a snapped branch under Maurice's foot spooks their target, and the chase ends in failure once again. Meanwhile, back at camp, life limps along. Piggy entertains the younger kids with stories. Ralph attempts to build a shelter, but the sticks keep collapsing on him, and Jack can't resist needling him about it. Though Ralph fires right back, pointing out the hunters haven't actually caught anything either. Despite the tension, the two end up racing into the ocean together, blowing off steam. Afterward, sprawled on the sand, they talk about how the younger kids keep waking up from nightmares, terrified. Simon joins the conversation and admits something unsettling. He believes there really is something on this island. He even thought he felt it while out in the woods. When he asks Jack directly if he sensed anything while hunting, Jack flatly denies it. Jack then tries recruiting Ralph into the hunting party, but Ralph turns him down. A chief, he says, needs to stay close to camp. Piggy interrupts to complain about hygiene issues with the younger kids, but Ralph brushes him off, telling him to save it for the next meeting. Piggy assumes this beach hangout was some kind of secret leadership huddle. Jack denies it and storms off. Later, while collecting wood with a few of his hunters, Jack gets the unmistakable sense that something is stalking him, though he says nothing. Then his eyes catch a glint high above on a rock formation, a piece of the plane's wreckage. Driven by something he can't quite explain, he starts climbing, and the higher he gets, the more his nerve cracks. Near the top, he panics, realizing he's gone too far, and when he tries to descend, he genuinely can't find footing. His friends rush in and help guide him down safely. The second his feet hit solid ground, he begs them not to tell anyone what almost happened. Up at the signal fire, the hunters spot a group of pigs resting on a grassy patch below and start plotting their attack route. Jack heads to the stream and smears mud across his face, some kind of disguise, or maybe armor. Simon comments that Jack seems to be enjoying himself a little too much out here. Jack insists he's just being serious about survival, and brings up stories his father told him about a childhood survival trip of his own. Simon, more pessimistic, doubts either of their fathers will be the ones to find them. Their only real hope rests with the other kids' families. Jack swears he isn't scared, just cautious, and Simon, taking pity, helps finish painting his face. The next day, Jack draws a picture in the sand. Hunters bringing down a pig, a fantasy not yet realized. At the camp, Piggy tries again to bring up practical concerns, but he's drowned out, mocked, talked over. Ralph grabs the conch and tries to restore some order, but even he can't get full respect anymore. Jack takes his turn and labels everyone crybabies. He's covered the whole island and seen no beast, so he tells them all to settle down and just listen to their chief. One of the younger boys describes a nightmare about twisting shapes in the trees and waking up to see something massive and horrifying nearby. The crowd laughs him off. Another small boy tries to speak up too, but between the heckling and laughter, all he can manage is to cry. Jack quietly pulls him aside afterward and learns the boy actually claims to have seen something out in the ocean. The hunters double down on preparation, full body paint, spears sharpened with stone, and follow a route Maurice scouted earlier to the pig's resting spot. They circle in slow and silent, but the pigs sense them anyway. The mother sends her piglets fleeing while the boys box her in. Jack lunges first, but his spear shatters on impact, useless. Another boy keeps striking with his own spear until the animal is bleeding and barely moving, and it's Jack who finishes it, slashing its throat, blood spraying across his face. For a moment, the boys just stand there in total silence, the weight of what they've just done settling over them. Someone quietly wonders what'll happen to the piglets without their mother. They lash the carcass to two poles and mount the severed head on a stick like a trophy, carrying it back through the forest while singing in celebration. Stopping at a stream to wash off, they stumble across an unexpected find, a suitcase wedged on the rocks. Inside, they discover toothpaste, which they eat without a second thought, and a diary that reveals the bag belongs to Simon. A second suitcase nearby holds women's clothing and makeup, which they immediately repurpose as war paint. When they finally make it back to camp, chaos greets them. Everyone screaming, blowing the conch, pointing at the horizon. There's a ship out there, but the signal fire has gone cold. Ralph is desperately trying to relight it, and Jack rushes to help, but it's already too late. The ship disappears into the distance. Ralph tears into the hunters for abandoning their one job, and even though some of them apologize, Jack tries to spin the dead pig as a worthy trade-off. Piggy isn't having it, calling Jack out directly, which earns him a punch to the face. Ralph has to physically pull Jack off him, and in the scuffle, Piggy's glasses crack. Jack, humiliated and defensive, declares this whole island is supposed to be an adventure and they're wasting it being boring. He announces he's starting his own camp. Nobody follows him at first, and he storms off alone, only to break down crying once he's out of sight. Back at camp, Piggy has no choice but to pop the cracked lens out of his glasses entirely, leaving him functioning with just one working eye. Ralph admits, quietly, that he's not sure he wants to be chief anymore. But Piggy talks him out of quitting, and Ralph promises to look out for him. While the two are distracted, most of the remaining hunters quietly slip away to join Jack's new camp. Almost immediately, Jack's group accomplishes something Ralph's never managed, a fully built shelter. Elsewhere in the woods, Simon stumbles across the pilot's remains, now reduced to a skeleton. Back at Jack's camp, Jack is flipping through Simon's stolen diary. That same night, something drops out of the sky and crashes near the dead signal fire. Soon after, something starts moving through the trees. We dip into Simon's dream, memories of choir practice, of loving to sing, but always feeling out of place in church because of feelings he kept hidden, feelings tied to Jack. Some of this is written in the diary Jack now possesses. The next morning, Piggy spots storm clouds gathering and voices his concern, but Ralph and Simon brush it off, trying and failing to coax him into the water to relax. That evening, Piggy is back to telling stories to the younger kids. Privately, Ralph and Simon have a quieter, heavier conversation. Simon opens up about his father, a man who hurt his mother, a man Simon hated. He recalls being asked which parent he loved more and freezing, too afraid to answer, watching his father drag his mother by the hair and tell her even her own son wouldn't defend her properly. Simon admits, with brutal honesty, that he's a coward, and that Jack is one too. But Ralph isn't, which is exactly why the group needs him. Ralph, confused about Simon and Jack's history, asks what's between them. Simon explains that outside of school, they only ever had each other, but once vacation ended, Jack always went back to ignoring him in favor of his other friends. Their conversation cuts short when the twins come sprinting in, screaming that they've seen the beast. The group heads to Jack's camp under a leaf held up like a peace flag. The twins explain they'd been tending the signal fire when something terrifying appeared, sending them running. Piggy proposes they band together to protect the youngest kids, and Simon backs him up. Jack scoffs, insisting this is hunter business, and insults Simon for not joining his side like the rest of the choir did. Ralph decides his group will team up with the hunters anyway. They need to face this beast together. There's one part of the island still unexplored, reachable only by a narrow, dangerous ridge. As chief, Ralph insists on crossing it himself and tells the others to wait, but Jack follows anyway. The two move carefully across the path, Ralph reaching the other side first and offering Jack a hand, which Jack refuses, stubbornly making it across on his own. They search the area and find nothing, which spirals into yet another argument. Jack accusing Ralph of hiding his own fear, Ralph firing back that Jack's tough exterior is mostly performance. Furious, Jack demands to know who's been talking. When they rejoin the group, Jack reads from Simon's diary out loud, deliberately humiliating him. As the search drags on into the late afternoon, Piggy grows nervous and suggests they regroup at camp and resume in daylight. Jack mocks him for it, but Simon defends him, and Jack reluctantly lets Piggy head back. Ralph decides a smaller team will move faster, so just 5 of them continue. Simon asks for his diary back. Jack refuses, calling it the most pathetic thing he's ever read. Eventually Ralph's energy gives out, and he stops to rest. Simon stays with him. Jack mocks Simon as nothing more than Ralph's dog, and pushes ahead with his 2 remaining hunters. Worried about leaving them, Ralph forces himself back up and follows, ignoring Simon's warning not to. They reach the summit, and there it is. A massive shape under fabric that suddenly rises, revealing a horrifying face. The boys scatter in terror. Only Simon lingers a fraction of a second longer, noticing something off about the way the monster moves. Almost mechanical, almost like a puppet. Back at camp, Jack sounds the conch to wake everyone and announces they've seen the beast, and it needs to be hunted. Ralph points out the irony. Jack ran just like everybody else. The argument boils over into a physical fight. They crash into the water together, and Jack beats Ralph down with the conch shell itself before storming off with the hunters. Simon is the one left to drag Ralph out of the water. That night, sleepless, Simon smears mud over his body and sneaks into Jack's camp to retrieve his diary. After rereading a few entries about happier times he and Jack once shared, he throws the diary into the fire himself. He returns to Ralph and Piggy and tells them something quietly devastating. He's happier with them than he ever was with his own family. Suddenly, the younger kids are screaming and scattering. The hunters are storming through camp wearing masks, carrying torches. Jack accuses everyone of being thieves, but also announces they've killed another pig, and there's a feast waiting. The hunters now refer to him as Chief. Ralph wonders aloud whether that means Jack will finally take responsibility for the fire. Jack doesn't bother answering. That evening, Simon visits the pilot's remains, now fully skeletal, and performs strange, almost ritualistic gestures over the body. Back at camp, he learns even more kids have defected to Jack's side. He suspects a trap. Piggy, more practical, figures they can grab some meat and leave before anything happens. Ralph agrees, and the 3 of them lead the rest of the holdouts to the feast. At Jack's camp, the atmosphere is wild. Music made from branches and coconuts, boys wrestling for fun, a pig roasting over open flame. Jack delivers a speech, and the crowd chants along with an intensity that feels less like celebration and more like worship. He offers Ralph the first cut of meat, and Simon, increasingly disturbed by what he's witnessing, walks off alone. Storm clouds roll in. Thunder cracks. Out in the dark, Simon finds the severed pig's head mounted on a stick and, in a feverish hallucination, hears it speak to him, calling him weak, crazy, ignorant, telling him to run. Disoriented, he flees, seeing flashes of the missing birthmark boy as he stumbles through the trees. Back at the feast, Jack dangles the promise of more food to win over the rest of the kids, and the crowd cheers him on, completely ignoring Ralph's reminder that he's still technically chief. The storm intensifies. Ralph urges everyone to find shelter, and once again, nobody listens. Instead, the boys race to the shoreline and start dancing like some kind of tribal ritual. As rain starts pouring, the game turns dark. One boy plays the beast, while the others chase him with spears, a game that horrifies both Ralph and Piggy. The chanting grows louder, more frenzied, until someone spots real movement in the trees. The group charges, weapons raised, and strikes, again and again, before anyone realizes what they've actually done. It wasn't the beast. It was Simon. His body is swept into the water and carried off by the current, gone before anyone can process it. The next morning, Ralph wanders the woods alone, lost in a memory, a hunting trip with his father, chasing a buck, tripping and hurting his arm. That night, recovering at home, he told his sick mother the whole story. Before bed, his father mentioned wanting to go hunting again the next day, but Ralph chose to stay home with his mom instead. Back in the present, as the surviving kids try to sleep through unsettling noises in the dark, Jack's hunters launch a raid on the old camp, pinning everyone down and stealing something specific, Piggy's glasses. Once they're gone, Piggy realizes exactly why. They need them to make fire. Somewhere far off, Something else falls from the sky into the ocean, unnoticed. Ralph eventually blows the conch one last time to call a meeting, and Piggy does a grim head count. It's down to just himself, Ralph, the twins, and 3 of the youngest kids. They decide their only option is to confront Jack directly and try to negotiate. When they arrive at his camp, what greets them barely resembles children anymore. Ralph calls Jack a thief to his face, and Jack tackles him instantly. A brutal fight erupts, the crowd cheering for their savage leader as he beats Ralph down with a spear. It's Piggy, grabbing the broken conch, who interrupts the violence. Calling out everyone's behavior one final time, Jack orders the others to silence him. Roger hurls a rock. It strikes Piggy directly in the head. He collapses. The conch, the last fragile symbol of order on this island, shatters on the rocks beside him. Ralph scrambles to his side, but Jack orders the hunters to seize them both. The twins are captured almost instantly. Ralph manages to knock Roger down with a rock and drags himself and Piggy into the forest, hiding beneath thick leaves just long enough for the search party to pass, without spotting them. Once it's safe, Piggy admits he doesn't feel right and throws up. Ralph holds his hand, but says nothing about how badly his head is actually bleeding, quietly wrapping his own shirt around the wound. When he tries to get Piggy moving again, Piggy's legs keep giving out. Ralph tells him to rest and goes searching for water alone, ignoring Piggy's desperate pleas not to leave him. While tracking his way back through the trees, Ralph sees a vision of Simon watching him silently. At the stream, he fills 2 coconut shells with water but has to duck out of sight when hunters appear across the water. When he tries to slip away, they spot him and the chase begins. He falls, twists his ankle, and is forced to crawl into tall grass and wait them out. Eventually, he makes it back to Piggy and shares the water, trying not to react to the amount of blood pooling beneath him. Piggy, weak but lucid, tells Ralph plainly, if the hunters find them, he has to run and not look back. That night, Piggy says he's cold. They settle in beneath the leaves together. The next morning, Ralph wakes up alone. Piggy is dead. He digs a grave with his bare hands, grief crashing over him as he works. In the silence, he remembers the day his own mother died, and a family friend telling him his father would need him now more than anyone. After bandaging his own ankle, Ralph creeps toward Jack's camp and quietly tells the twins what happened to Piggy. But Roger overhears, and the alarm goes up instantly. What follows is hours of pursuit through the jungle. At one point, Ralph submerges himself in the stream just to avoid detection. When Jack gets close enough, Ralph throws a rock to create an opening and emerges to face him head-on. They grapple, exhausted, until Ralph steps back and demands Jack actually choose what kind of person he's going to be. Instead, Jack screams for backup, and Ralph has no option left but to run again. The chase eats up the rest of the day. Ralph finally hides, trying to slow his breathing, but Roger has a new idea: smoke him out using Piggy's stolen glasses to start a fire. The hunters spread the flames with torches, and soon the entire forest is choking in smoke. Ralph can barely breathe, but in the chaos, that same smoke becomes his cover, letting him slip away unseen. Stumbling blindly through the burning trees, he has one more vision: Piggy, smiling at him. Exhausted, broken, surrounded by fire, Ralph finally screams out Jack's name and surrenders to whatever comes next. And then he breaks through the tree line onto the beach and freezes. There's a boat. 2 Navy officers, standing right there in front of him. The hunters, chasing him moments earlier, skid to a stop the second they see the adults, the savagery draining out of them instantly, replaced by something like shame. The officer is visibly horrified, both by the state these boys are in and by Ralph telling him, through tears, that kids have died here. When he asks who's in charge, Jack says nothing. It's Ralph who finally answers, sobbing, breaking down completely. That he was the leader. The officer takes them all back to the boat, and as the island shrinks behind them, every single one of those boys is left carrying the same unbearable truth. They'll have to live with what they did here for the rest of their lives. And that's the story. A handful of kids, completely cut off from any rules, any consequences, any adult to answer to. And within days, the thin line between civilized and savage basically disintegrates. What's the most disturbing part for you? Simon's death, Piggy's, or just how fast the whole group turned? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to know. And look, if you made it this far into the video, you clearly enjoy this kind of breakdown. So do me a real favor and hit subscribe. It costs you nothing, it takes 2 seconds, and it directly decides whether channels like this one can keep making videos like this for free. Don't be the person who watches the whole thing and skips the one click that actually supports it. Subscribe, drop a comment, and I'll see you in the next one.